Sorry about that, everybody. My camera just decided that it wanted to totally reset itself at the beginning of the stream, as always. Well, hey, thanks so much, everybody, for being here tonight. My name is Ben Jackson. I'm one of the co-founders of Upsolve. And a few years ago, I found myself drowning in over $60,000 of credit card debt, which is why I started Upsolve. It's why I do the show every week, because I felt completely stuck under that debt. And so I've dedicated my life to helping make sure that nobody else has to be stuck the way that I was. Bankruptcy was the thing that I found that set me free to restart my life and achieve the American dream. And so bankruptcy is the thing that I know, love, and do every day. It really allowed me to reset my mental health, reset my finances, and get on a journey towards prosperity. Nobody should be trapped in shame the way that I was. And so part of the point of these webinars is to kind of help remove the shame and stigma around filing bankruptcy, because it isn't shameful. It's a tool that you can use, just like rich people do, to get on your feet financially and move on from your debt. So this session is meant to empower you. If you have questions as we go, please ask them in the chat. We'll get to as many of them as we can. Last week we had so many, we weren't able to get to all of them. So hopefully we'll have just as many this week. We're going to be covering a few different things. We're going to talk about Chapter 7 bankruptcy, who qualifies for it. We're going to talk a little bit about the process of bankruptcy. We're going to talk about what happens to your assets and your credit. We're going to talk about something really cool, which is how Upsolve is using AI tools to make the bankruptcy process easier. And my guest tonight, who will finally get to talk in a second, and I'll shut my mouth here, somebody I deeply admire, Jonathan Petz, who is Upsolve's CEO and my co-founder. Jonathan has over a decade of experience in bankruptcy. He has clerked for 2 bankruptcy judges. He's worked as a bankruptcy attorney at major law firms. And he's even advised the World Bank and the IMF on insolvency policy. In 2023, Money Magazine named Jonathan one of the top 50 innovators shaping America's finances. Simply put, he is the reason that I'm able to do what I do today, and the reason that Upsolve is still up and chugging along. So Jonathan, welcome to the show again. And I want to start with a question, and that is, if bankruptcy was an interpretive dance, and you had to explain it to somebody using an interpretive dance, what would that dance be called? What, you weren't ready for that question?
This is a Ben original here, ladies and gentlemen. So it would be something really joyful. I'm a Christian. I'm going to a place in the Old Testament where King David recaptures the Ark of the Covenant and from the Philistines, and just gets down in the street and starts dancing like a crazy person, with so much joy, from recovering this big thing for the Israelite people, and I think that would be my call. Overcoming adversity and getting massive joy.
Dance like David. I love it. All right. Well, let's get into some more serious things. What the heck is bankruptcy? Like, how would you define it? Not an interpretive dance, to somebody that was curious what it was.
Bankruptcy is really simple. It is a process by which folks who have gone through some really hard times, have guaranteed to them by the Constitution, to erase their debts. You fill out some forms, you take a couple mandatory financial courses online, and you attend a brief Zoom meeting with a trustee overseeing your case. And in 96% of cases, folks get a fresh start, all of their unsecured debt erased, and keep their assets, and have an opportunity to restart and to find opportunity for themselves and their families.
96% of cases sounds like this is something that is pretty much good or effective for everybody. Are there people that bankruptcy isn't a good fit for?
Well, on the margins, there's always cases of involving fraud, right? So it's not, if you want to commit fraud, bankruptcy is not a good fit. If you're higher income and you have a lot of assets, then your creditors have a right to recover some of that, and so it makes it a lot harder. But for low income folks with low to no assets, like which is Upsolve's core user base, it's a lot simpler.
So what makes doing bankruptcy, which is, I'm assuming it's a legal process because lawyers do it, what makes filing bankruptcy with Upsolve different than hiring a lawyer?
Well, these are great foundational questions here that I haven't thought of in a long time. I would say that bankruptcy is a foreign-based process, as I said. And when you look at the bankruptcy forms, 90 pages full of dense legalese, like unsecured non-priority debt. Do you have any of that? And because these
I
forms
ate a bowl of it for breakfast this morning, I think.
because these forms were designed by lawyers, it's really hard for people who didn't go to law school to fill out. And what Upsolve does is it just translates all of this stuff into plain language, the same way that TurboTax does for folks filing taxes, and makes it a simple process. Like if you can get a lawyer, if you can afford that, that's great. Our users can't afford that, and so the software guides them through in a similar way.
I've heard people say that if you file bankruptcy, it's going to destroy your credit. You're going to lose all of your property, things. Like you kind of just start over from zero. And I'd imagine that's one of the reasons that it can be better to work with a lawyer. Do they kind of help you avoid that? Or tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, working with a lawyer doesn't change the impact of credit on your bankruptcy.
Does it change what I might lose, though, or what?
No. I mean, there are laws called exemption laws that will protect your property. Upsolve sort of automates that process of listing the exemptions for you, and our support team reviews that. So no, but it is nice. It is nice if you have a lawyer just to sit with you in the Zoom meeting with the trustee, and to be able to ask, to call. But we prepare the forms and guide the software sort of guides you through all those other steps too.
Okay. So lawyers can provide a little bit of extra help. Maybe if you have assets or something at risk, they might be able to help you better protect them in some instances. But on the whole, It sounds like it's the same.
It's the same for low-income folks filing for Chapter 7. It's the same. If you're filing for Chapter 13, let's say you own a house, you definitely need a lawyer for that.
Okay. Got it. And are there different costs to Upsolve depending upon how complex your case is or what you're doing or anything like that?
So Upsolve itself is completely free. We're funded by philanthropy from foundations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Robin Hood Foundation. So these are foundations that fund basically technology to help low-income folks achieve economic mobility and make it to the middle class. And debt is one of the big things that holds low-income folks back. So it's free.
I mean, imagine, I'm looking at Upsolve's website. It says you guys have helped we have helped over 17,000 people. I'm imagining something that's free, that's helping that many people. You don't get a lot of support and guidance. So like how, if I'm working with Upsolve, if I'm concerned about having my questions answered or things, how do you guys handle that?
Well, we do have a very dedicated support team of paralegals, Melissa and Jackie, and they will, if you message us, you start the app, you can, message us and ask questions, and they'll respond to you. Given how many questions we have, how many users we have, it may take a couple days. If you want a quicker answer, we also have an AI co-pilot that will give you an on-demand answer that's just taken from our proprietary content library. There it is down there. And let's see what it says.
Oh boy.
We're going to need to update the AI. Yeah, so that's another option, that about half of our users are using this AI to answer their questions on demand.
Does it work? I mean, I don't ask ChatGPT questions a lot of times because I've heard that it kind of just hallucinates and just says crazy things that it makes up. Like, why would I trust this?
Yeah, well, I mean, as you can see right there, that's a good example of what's good about this AI is it comes from our content exclusively. So we have many long form articles on all these different bankruptcy related topics on our site in our learning center. But the issue is you have to read a 2,000 word article to find your answer in that content. And what this AI does is it takes that content and gives you like a personalized, concise, to the point answer right in the AI. And so it saves a lot of time.
Awesome. That's very cool. I feel like there should be a lot more solutions like this coming out in the future. The good side of AI. All right. Well, we're going to go into a lightning round of getting to know you. We're moving beyond your expertise. You ready to get personal?
Let's do it.
All right. What the heck do you actually do at Upsolve?
My number one job is I fundraise. So I write grants. I reach out to foundations to explain the work that we do to help low-income folks overcome debt at scale. And I come up with grant proposals of how we can help more people with their money.
Love it. So try to get people to believe in this mission. How did you end up here? Like, this is a weird thing to end up doing.
So I was a corporate bankruptcy lawyer in my past life in New York, and I was helping companies like Kodak restructure. And in my spare time, I was doing pro bono cases, helping low-income New Yorkers fill out the 100-page forms for Chapter 7 bankruptcy and get a fresh start. And I was amazed by how brutally difficult it was to fill out these forms with legalese. And one of my first pro bono clients told me, she was this big success story. She got a new job, debt-free, 680 credit score. And she said, if I hadn't found you, I still would be trapped in this debt because it cost $2,000 to hire a bankruptcy lawyer. And if I had $2,000, I wouldn't be filing for bankruptcy.
Yeah, of course.
And that made me realize how bankruptcy law is really part of our social safety net in America for folks for whom things have gone really wrong. And the problem is that the people who need that safety net the most can't access it because they can't pay lawyers.
How did you learn about
our vision was to use technology to automate this process for low-income folks who have simple cases.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How did you learn about bankruptcy in the first place? Like, was it something you kind of always knew about, something you'd come across like in school?
In my first year of law school, I did a summer internship. I was late applying for summer jobs, and I just reached out to every federal court basically to see if I could get an internship. And lo and behold, a bankruptcy judge in Brooklyn named Elizabeth Stamm responded, and she said, there's this summer, it was summer of 2005, which had the biggest change in bankruptcy law in maybe the past 50 years. And she's like, there's this big change happening, and everyone thinks that they're not going to be able to file for bankruptcy anymore after this year. And so we're expecting a lot of people coming to the court and to try to file at the last minute before the law changes. And so I spent that summer, both half of it was writing memos for her in her chambers, and then the other half was in the clerk's office of the bankruptcy court, helping people who are trying to fill out these forms right before the law changed, and it was amazing because I got to see, firsthand, one, how miserably difficult this process was of
Yeah.
filling out all these forms,
Yeah.
and and secondly, the impact that these forms made. If you could,
Yeah.
get them done and filed, and the power of the fresh start.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, speaking of the complexity, when I filed bankruptcy on my own, I remember there was a point where I think I had like every flat surface in my house covered up with forms. They were the wrong forms from the wrong states. Like, it's just absolute chaos. Like, reams and reams of paper. I had no idea what I was doing. And so it definitely makes a lot of sense that that would have been a motivating factor, because I saw that and it stressed me out. It sounds like you saw that and you're like, somebody needs to do something about this.
Yeah, exactly,
So we
exactly.
got some questions in from the audience, starting with Ebony B. I'm court ordered to recover child support. I received it for about 3 months, and now I am not. Do I still mention it on my bankruptcy filings? What do you think?
Yeah, that's an asset in your
Mhm.
bankruptcy case, the right to receive money from your um, co-parent, and the bankruptcy court wants to know about all of your assets. Now, you know, it doesn't mean it's not exempt
Mhm.
and protected. As I said, the vast majority of all Chapter 7 cases, I believe 99% when I last looked, are no asset, meaning,
Mhm.
all property is protected. But the court still wants to know about all your assets.
Mhm. So it's still an asset, even if I haven't been receiving it, and
Yeah,
like there's
exactly.
no chance that I might receive it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of a bummer. How So this next question from So Amazing: how hard is it to find a place to live after filing bankruptcy? I see on a lot of applications for rentals they ask about it, and it's one of the things I'm concerned with.
Yeah. So this is, there's no real data on this. Um, but anecdotally, I think in many cases it's easier to rent an apartment after
Hmm.
filing bankruptcy
How so?
than immediately before. So if you have, imagine you're a landlord, Ben, and you
Mhm.
have an application from a rental application from somebody who has um, 15 debts that are
Mm.
totaling
Yeah.
$35,000, and you have another rental application from somebody who has zero debt,
Hmm.
but has a bankruptcy, in the past on their credit report. Which of those two tenants would you rather rent to?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at their income and they have all these debts, and I'm like, they don't have a lot of money left over to pay rent, I'm definitely going to be more interested in the person that doesn't have that tax on their income.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the choice, right? So often, just getting rid of that delinquent debt and getting
Hmm.
a clean slate will make you a better um, a better candidate
Yeah.
compared to a version of you that has that debt.
Speaking from personal experience, I didn't have any trouble finding a place to live after filing bankruptcy for exactly that reason, right? Like, prior to bankruptcy, I had, 75+% of my income going to paying off my debt. And after bankruptcy, I did not have any of that going to it. So I was less house poor, if you will, for my rent. Um, One other thing that I've seen people do is, if you're struggling, your landlord says, hey, your credit doesn't pass, I'm worried about this bankruptcy, whatever. Finding somebody to co-sign on a lease application can help.
Mm.
As can, potentially finding an apartment with somebody else. If I've lived in a few like room shares post bankruptcy, that can be a thing too. But usually it doesn't, cause too many problems for the reason Jonathan said. And the more important question, right? Like, can you eventually achieve the American dream and buy a house? Yes, for sure. Like, the house that I'm in right now is a house that I bought after bankruptcy. So
Ben's house is beautiful,
thank
in a
you.
beautiful neighborhood. It's yeah. We'll have an Upsolve user house party at some point.
I feel
Well,
like I'm gonna have to get that approved by my wife, but yeah, we'll make it happen. Another question here from Joy Cotrell. While filing the bankruptcy forms, or filling out the bankruptcy forms and filing for bankruptcy, what do we tell the credit card companies that are coming after us for payment? So it sounds like you have some debt and collections. They require the name of my attorney and my case number to stop calling me. Great question, Joy.
Well, so the way that I'm reading this, Joy, is you haven't filed for bankruptcy yet.
Mm-hmm.
And once you have filed for bankruptcy, they're going to be notified automatically by the court.
Mm-hmm.
And then, if you still get called by a credit card company, and that's like,
It happens, yeah.
it happens, but not super common, because again, they get notice immediately. Then you just tell them, hey, I filed for bankruptcy. Here's my case number, and that should stop.
Yeah, and if they ask about a lawyer, just say you did it pro se. That's the special word, PROSC, just means you did it by yourself. All right, another question from Ebony. I'm currently enrolled in school and using my GI Bill. Do I mention the education benefit payments as well? I actually don't know the answer to this. Do you know this, Jonathan?
I don't either. Yeah, I don't know the answer to
Curious.
that.
I'm
sorry.
gonna look this up. Ebony, we'll get back to this in a second. I don't want to give you the wrong answer. So amazing. While I'm looking for an answer for Ebony's question, if you were a joint person on a bank account that was close to a negative balance, excuse me, am I able to include that in the bankruptcy? I'm not quite sure I follow. If you're a joint person on a bank account, the bank account was closed because it was negative. Can I include that? Oh, okay, got it. So the debt from the money that you owed because the bank account was negative.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then that would be a debt. Like, if you have a negative balance on anything, then that's, you owe money, and that's a debt. And so if you put it on the bankruptcy, then I mean, yes, you can include that in the bankruptcy.
And I found an answer to your question. I wish I had an Upsolve article that I could send you for this, Ebony, about the GI Bill. So it's they're not considered income in the same way that like wages or a job would be considered income, those GI benefits. But for bankruptcy, you do still need to list parts of the benefit. So you list the tuition payments that are made directly to your school. They're not income, so you wouldn't list those as income. But the housing allowance or money that you get deposited into your account as part of the GI Bill, those you would list. So it kind of depends on what benefits you're getting from the GI Bill, tuition or housing allowances and cash deposits. So any money that they give you, those you report as income. Tuition, you wouldn't. Now, the trustee, when you go in for your 341, like they might ask you about it still, but it's not going to count as like an income offset equal to the tuition. So you're not going to look like you have too much money to file bankruptcy, for example. All right. So amazing says, correct. It wasn't placed in my credit report, but is still in the bank system. Yeah, that's interesting. So the negative balance didn't go in your credit report. I mean, there's a lot of things you can owe money on that don't necessarily show up on your credit report that a bankruptcy would wipe away still. Like,
Yeah,
maybe you owe somebody like legally $500 that you borrowed from them that could potentially be discharged in a bankruptcy, even if it's on your credit report.
yeah, and the best practice, you want to include every debt, whether you think you owe it or you don't, on your bankruptcy. Because if you don't owe a debt before filing bankruptcy, you really won't owe it after. So
Yep. Yeah. Great point. All right. So we've slowed down on user questions. If anybody has any more, throw those in the chat. Looks like we got a pretty good audience in here now. So fire away while you have Jonathan. Jonathan, I'm curious, what did you study when you were in school? I know you talked about law school. What did you study before that? And like, how do you think it shapes the work you do today?
I studied English literature in college, and I think it shaped. I think I have a love for the written word, for really clear and persuasive writing, and that's a big part of what I do in writing grants for foundations to fund our work and to help more folks. And so I think that would be the biggest.
Clear writing. I love it. I think it gets reflected in a lot of the articles and things that are on Upsolve's website. What did you originally want to be when you grew up? I'm guessing not a bankruptcy lawyer.
I think the first time I answered that question, it was a professional baseball player for the New York
Nice.
Mets. A little bit, I became a competitive tennis player a little bit later, and then it was all about wanting to. It was a lot of my youth was just about sports and wanting to play sports at a high level.
I love that. Where'd that dream go? Is that still there?
That dream is dead. I mean, I have my dream job right now, so
I love that. Yeah, I feel
one
like
that
we all have to hit the point where we realize we can't be a pro athlete.
yeah.
I'm still working on getting there. Um, what's something that happened in your perspective, in your life, something that you ran across that changed how you see the world? Or if not the world, your work. I feel like that could be far too global. Something that changed your view of the world or the work that you do.
I mean, I think it was that summer in 2005
Yeah.
when the bankruptcy law was changing, and I was in this courthouse in Brooklyn, and people were just coming, um, in mob and being like, "I need to file for bankruptcy tomorrow," and
Yeah.
they were. This is the part that I remember the most. So you had to. This was 2005. It was like Upsolve didn't exist back then, and everything was about filling out paper forms. And so people would go to Staples and they would buy these packets of forms that they would have like copies. So it would be like, um, you'd write on the form, and then you'd pull off two pieces of paper underneath that would have
Mm.
copies of it. It was this company
Carbon
called
copies.
Blumberg.
Yeah.
So everyone was coming in there, and they had like, three copies of everything, didn't know what was going on. Then there was like, what are the local forms that weren't in this packet at Staples? And what do all these questions mean? And it was just like chaos. And I was thinking to
Mm.
myself, wow, this is um, really unfair that's what we made. This is the process we
Yeah.
make people navigate who are going through some really tough times to actually get their fresh
Yeah.
start.
When you're the most stressed out, you have to deal with the most convoluted process. It's so
Exactly.
ridiculous.
It's outrageous, really.
So bankruptcy is at its core about money and how you think about money and financial opportunity and debt. What's your personal philosophy of money? How do you tend to think about it? Like, what's it for?
My personal philosophy of money is winning at money is when you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, very
And
true.
I'm a big believer that anything that you can automate with your money um,
Hmm.
is, I think that's really the dream. And it takes margin to be able to automate
Hmm.
stuff. You can automate stuff and then bounce checks, and then all of a sudden those automations aren't valuable, right? And so
Yeah.
my hope and my prayer for Upsolve users is that they go through this process, they get rid of this debt, they stop wage garnishment,
Hmm.
uh, they have this fresh start, and to get to the point where income can be sufficiently higher than expenses to the point where they
Hmm.
have this margin, and then they can automate savings every month, ultimately automate investments in, let's say, an ETF, an index fund, and really build wealth. Because that's,
Hmm.
in my opinion, how you build wealth in America, is just automating, putting your money in the right place without having to think about it.
So, what do you think of when you hear the word debt?
I think of a book called Debt: The First 5,000 Years by a sociologist named David Graeber. And the reason that I think about it is because there's nothing, the whole point of this book is we think that debt is something shameful that just happened to us.
Hmm.
Debt's been around for 5,000 years. There's nothing new about it. There's nothing unique about your particular, debt problem. It's part of our capitalist system.
Hmm.
And knowing that, I think, is really valuable because it makes you realize you're not alone.
Hmm. So, what's one piece of advice you'd give to somebody who's struggling with debt?
Well, okay, the number one is to come up with a plan for repaying.
Hmm.
Like, what are your debts? Make a list of them. And figure out which you need to deal with first,
Hmm.
right? Certain debts, if you don't pay them now, you're going to get sued. Your wages are going to get garnished. Um, and then certain ones you're not.
Hmm.
Um, and knowing, which debts to address first is really important.
Hmm. So, understand how much money you have, where it's going, what debts you have, and the risk of paying off or not paying off those debts. Like, how the hell do you figure that out? Like, I'm thinking about when I was dealing with my debt, I didn't know which ones I should pay off first. Like, are there good resources to kind of help figure that out?
Reddit has a lot of forums on this where people just dump all their debts in, and
Oh, fun.
folks in the forum give advice on which
Yeah.
to deal with first. Um, Upsolve is actually building something to address this in the future to solve this problem, um, but yeah, I would say start with Reddit.
I love that. I feel like it's the first time Reddit's ever gotten a shout out for debt advice.
Yeah.
One last question from So Amazing. I tried to start a business in 2021 and I funded it on credit cards. Hey, I see you. That's exactly what I did. That's where my debt came from, which led to debt. There are questions on the forum about business debt. Would that be considered personal or business debt? What do you think, Jonathan?
So I can't answer this without knowing more details about this, but I'll give you an example. Like if um, actually, Ben, why don't you answer this in your personal case?
Yeah. So usually it depends on what your business is incorporated as. Like if you have an LLC or an INCSE Corp, and as long as you're not breaking any rules, you're properly running the business finances through the business. Generally speaking, that debt's going to be considered business debt. But if you're doing what I was doing, which is like you don't have an LLC, you don't have an incorporation or anything like that, and it's just what's called a sole proprietorship. It's just you run a side business, you report that income on your taxes. In that world, it would be considered your personal debt. It can get a little complicated, so I definitely suggest if this is a significant amount of debt for you, it'd be a good idea to talk with a lawyer. And Upsolve can help you find a free lawyer through our bankruptcy tool. But generally speaking, if you have an entity that you've incorporated as, it's going to be under the entity and business debt. If you don't, it's going to be personal debt. All right, Jonathan. Thanks so much for your time tonight. Thanks everybody that joined in. This is a really important thing that you're doing being here. The most important step to get over debt is just start doing it. And so I'm really proud of you all for being here, for taking the time to listen, to think, and to ask questions. We do these webinars every Monday nights. So if you know anybody who would benefit from this, or if you have more questions, come on back. We'd love to have you. Jonathan, what is one thing you want to leave our listeners with tonight before we sign off?
I would say the fact that you're here shows a lot of courage and initiative.
Hmm.
Filing bankruptcy, even getting to the point where you're researching it, like folks on here are, it takes courage and it takes energy. And a lot of folks who are going through this, they have debt collectors calling them all the time, sapping energy. And I just want to say, keep pushing, because if you
Yeah.
get to the other side of debt, life
Hmm.
becomes so much easier,
Mm-hmm.
and opportunity filled.
Yeah, I love that. Well, wise words, Jonathan. Thanks for sharing them. Thanks again, everybody. We will see you again next week for another webinar. Take care.